Can you see the chat, David?
Oh, not yet. I
Oh
I need
no,
to. I'll
I've.
pull it up.
It looks like I've only got the chat. Then it's just
Okay.
no. I've got it on my other screen. So
Okay.
because we've already had one comment, which is kind of interesting.
Okay.
Um,
I'm
I
gonna try and find it.
Well, welcome everyone, and I just want to check that everyone can hear us and see us okay. So let's have a big thumbs up from the chat that everything is working okay before I do some introductions. Hi there, Cloak and Swagger. Hi there, Nikita Ukraine, Jörg Melchers, Taylor McKinnon, Abdul Rahman Al Sayed. Hello, everyone, and there's lots there. Great to see you. Yeah, all good. Guy Oliveira says all good. Fantastic. So, yeah, we're getting the thumbs up from everyone in the chat, loud and clear. So that's fantastic. I can already see we've already got a couple of comments. We've got "Let's grind, baby" from Jörg Melchers. We have "Grinding is my favourite pastime" from Cloak and Swagger. Um, looking forward grinding some chess. Okay, this is, I think everyone's got the right idea, so I think now I can do a proper introduction. So, well, welcome everyone, and welcome to this very special broadcast with a very special guest. So we have David Howell here, renowned Grandmaster and a now renowned commentator, of course, as well. So David, welcome. How are you?
Thanks, Dan. I'm good. I'm good. I'm following in your footsteps with the commentating, and I've been a big fan of this channel for years, as
Oh,
are a lot of my friends. So it's nice to be here.
that's really kind. Thank you. Well, we're here. It's really nice to catch up, but let's just get it out there right at the beginning. And everyone in the chat seems to have exactly the right idea. So we're promoting your new book, which is called, I hope everyone can see that okay, "Grind Like a Grandmaster," which you've authored with the man himself, Magnus Carlsen. Well, there you are.
Yeah.
So a very special publication. And I have to say, it is a really well-designed book. "Grind Like a Grandmaster." It's published by New in Chess in collaboration with Chessable. It's $29.95, €29.95. Beautifully designed book, I have to say. I hope you're pleased with it, David.
Yeah. Thanks for the kind words. I hope you're not just being nice there,
No,
but
not at all. No, I listen. You know, as you can see behind me, I like a chess book. I'm overflowing with books here, but I always like a book which is really well laid out, and I think if I can show that on screen, you can probably just about see that. It's really well laid out. So yeah, I hope you're pleased with what they've done to it.
yeah. I mean, I'm very happy. We had a lot of discussions with New in Chess, had some meetings, and about how we wanted it to look. First of all,
Mm.
I think the main debate was on the cover, which is kind of a bit like Marmite, I would say. You'd love it or hate it.
I like it. Yeah,
Yeah, it's definitely grown on me. I really love it now.
I think it's really
But yeah,
striking. Really striking
yeah,
cover.
yeah. I think it's based on old photos of us. We both look slightly different now, but yeah. I mean, the contents itself, like the chess stuff. I was really proud of it. There's been stuff added. It's kind of based, as some people may know, on this Chessable course. These videos that I did with Magnus last year, and yeah, we've added a little bit here and there, just to kind of make it suit the book format a bit better. And yeah,
Absolutely.
I can't complain.
No, it looks great. Now
I just hope
listen.
the readers enjoy as much as I did making
Okay,
it.
now listen. Let's get down to business, because let's talk about the title. First things first. "Grind Like a Grandmaster." Now, some might say that's a slightly controversial title. Now, how did you get that one through the censors? Tell me the story of how
I,
you got to that title.
I didn't expect to be grilled this early in the show. um, yeah, so it was kind of, I mean, grinding out an advantage, grinding in the end game. That's kind of been kind of informal chess terminology for a while, and it's yeah, it was kind of an in joke that I had with Magnus, that we have this grindy style, and Of course, the word grinding does have its certain connotations. And when I pitched the idea to Chessable, the title originally, they were like, please don't do that. Please, any other title. Magnus involved, like it will sell great. Just don't risk it with this title.
But
But
you pushed it through.
yeah,
You
we were
made
insistent. We were like, that's the only deal breaker we have, the only clause.
fantastic. Well, okay. Well, let's ask the chat. Chat, do you like the title "Grind Like a Grandmaster"? Does it work for you? Let's ask everyone in the chat. What do they think? We'll wait for that. But yeah, but you're absolutely right. Of course, in formal chess terminology, you grind out an advantage in an endgame is absolutely normal lingo, and that's something that you're with your well. I mean, you play in lots of different ways, but that's something that you enjoy doing. And well, Magnus, of course, is absolutely renowned for doing this. So it seems pretty normal to me, actually.
Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of seeped over into daily life as well. It's like, oh, I'm back on the grind,
Yeah,
just working hard, hustling away. And
yeah.
I mean, it's a coincidence that Magnus and I used to spend times in kind of a lot of time in nightclubs. I mean, that's just a different kind of grinding. And I think that was kind of part of the allure we were going for. But
Right.
no, it's definitely about the chess and the end games in general.
Okay, well, we've got big fan of the title. The title's perfect. Title well chosen. It's great. Hope there's no pictures though. So and
No proof of these comments in the chat.
this is great. Manmoth1990 actually says, I actually work in grinding tiles for bathrooms. So yeah, great title. There we go. We've got lots of different meanings. And there's also there's grind music as well. That particular UK genre of music, which is very much homegrown and spread to the rest of the world. So that's kind of an interesting association as well. Okay, so grinding out an advantage, an end game. So we've got a game on the board straight away, and is that the first time that you played against Magnus?
Yeah, this was actually, I think, maybe the second time we ever met. This is the first game we had with kind of born 2 weeks apart. We played a few times in these World Youth events, and at the time we didn't like each other. We were definitely more rivals than friends. And this is how I became accustomed. I started to become familiar with his style, and this was kind of a mixed memory for me. In hindsight, it was actually. It was nice to be a part of history. I'll kind of tell the story in a moment, maybe. But at the time, I just thought, okay, I'm playing for a medal. I'm playing this Norwegian upstart, this kid who's just suddenly appeared from nowhere, who looks like a cuddly teddy bear, and he was far from it on the chessboard.
Yeah. So you played against each other, World Under 12 in Heraklion. I've just come back from Heraklion, actually.
Small.
Curiously enough. Let's have a look at these moves actually. So H4, a classic grind move, of course, advancing the good old H pawn.
Exactly, and I mean, just a bit of background to this game. So going in, myself, I was actually half a point behind two leaders, Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi, who's also made a decent career for himself. And having black, my coach Glenn Fleer at the time, he was saying, okay, just hustle him, just don't get into any endgame, don't give him a stable position. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's how I play chess. And I kind of needed to win at all costs if I wanted to get a gold medal. But the opening turned out pretty bad, as you can see. Well, as some may have seen, I played knight c6 on move one, and it all went a bit wrong. But this position, it's probably the best position I'd had all game. But yeah, Magnus here started grinding, and I think we both made mistakes due to the naivety of youth. And h4, unpleasant move to face in any position, especially with a black pawn on g6. It's typical slow improving move. Magnus still does it to this day. We talk about it actually quite a lot in the book, pushing the a pawn as far up the board as possible, pushing the h pawn, because they are potential queens if they get to h5, h6.
But also they're very tidy moves, aren't they? Because when you advance a rook's pawn, they don't actually affect the center, at least, or they don't expose the king. And that's the great advantage of pushing the rook's pawn rather than, let's say, the f pawn, where one could see obvious weaknesses created.
Yeah,
But
true grinder never pushes the f pawn down.
no, absolutely not. Not this early. We've got a question from Kevin Winter. There we go. Who
Hey,
says, yeah, hi Kevin. Who is the book aimed at? None of the chat can press like a 2700 and 2800 GM. So who's this aimed at, David?
I would like to say everyone. I think the book in general, you need to have a certain level, but I think it's more towards players who, I don't want to put a rating on it, but players who kind of play down the club or play in tournaments or kind of just play regularly online. It's kind of about giving you this mindset of always trying to squeeze your opponent to the maximum. I think Magnus is famous for his sporting mindset, so it's a lot about the result. It's about doing things the ugly way. There's this cliche, right, about sports teams knowing how to win when they're not on form, when they're not kind of firing on all cylinders, and they don't necessarily kind of get things given to them. And yeah, I mean, obviously Magnus himself, he's unique, but you definitely don't need to have his level, hopefully, to understand the book.
Yeah.
It's just a few secrets into how we think when we're kind of sitting in these equal positions, trying to outfox our opponents. And
well,
I think it can help anyone over maybe 1500 level.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can answer that a bit better as I, as I'm kind of looking on the outside. What I really like about this book is that it's not packed with, like a telephone book with lots of analysis. You can probably see there, it's basically describing your thoughts and the kind of things you're trying to achieve. Obviously, featuring your games and Magnus's games. So, for example, I mean, I'm just picking a comment at random here. So Magnus says, right, looking at White's position, what screams out here is that unless there's a concrete refutation, White just wants to push the H-pawn, grabbing a bit of space. This makes it harder for Black to manoeuvre the king to the queen side, because White's kingside pawns are closer to the other side and therefore more likely to become passers at some point. It's a key move. It's hard to see a problem for White here. So it's describing play rather than giving reams of variations, which is why I think the book is suitable for, well, let's say club players, but certainly not at a really very high level, because everything is explained beautifully. So yeah, so I hope that answers your question. So I'd really recommend it, actually. I think it's an excellent book.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, anyone who's seen kind of how I commentate and stuff, the goal is always to make it accessible. So hopefully for all levels, it's got something, at least a little something for someone.
Definitely. Peter asks, what year was this played? This was played in 2002. So let's continue with the game, actually.
Yeah, so here Black is very, very stuck. Black has this horrible backward pawn on d7, therefore a bad bishop on c8. So a few moves down the line, we kind of maneuvered for a little while, king g7. King g2 is always a nice move. You mentioned h4, Dan, earlier. Like, especially with this, we talk about pawn structure a lot in the book, and especially with a white fianchetto with a pawn on g3. I mean, it's always nice to get h4 in, because if a black bishop ever lands on h3, you kind of have these mating patterns. So White's king is kind of ideally placed, as it is now on g2. So he's just slowly improving Magnus, and this is something he's done since he was a kid, evidently. So a few moves down the line, h6.
It's interesting, isn't it? When the rook's pawn advances, Black always has this dilemma. Do you ignore it? Do you block it? Or do you kind of cope with it with h6? And you went for h6, but there are pros and cons to all of these moves. If you play h5, then of course that can weaken this square. If you let it run, then it might land on h6. It's a tough decision, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating the kind of options White has as well. In the past, I would have looked at this position and said White was playing h4 to play h5 and open the h file and checkmate on the h file. Now, as you mentioned, White's dream is to kind of put a pawn on h6 and just sit, and all sorts of mating patterns. And yeah, the downside to h6, like you said, h5 might allow some bishop g5 ideas long term, but the downside to h6 becomes apparent later in the endgame only. And we'll get to that moment where, again, long-term factors kind of appeal to any grinder. But okay, let's go down queen f6. And queen e4 was the first time in the game that I got a bit of hope. I think if white sits and just plays a move like this, rook d3 or any improving move, white will slowly build up. Surely bishop d2, rook f3. There's going to be all sorts of threats. But
yes.
queen to e4. I think, with the grindy style that I have these days, I would kind of wince at playing this move because it allows a tactical shot. And d5, as soon as things become concrete, that's where, calculation comes in, and it's harder to play purely on instincts. And here I managed to swap off some pieces.
Yeah, that must have come as a huge relief.
Yeah, massive relief. But it was only after the rooks came off and he played queen c4 that I suddenly realized I think I had maybe 10, 15 minutes on my clock at this point. You know me, we've played a few times. I don't tend to handle my clock too practically, but I kind of spent the remaining amount of my time deciding whether to trade the queens off here. And I did, because I was a coward. but again, in hindsight, now I know a bit more about endgames. Unless I'm 100% sure that black is drawing, and I certainly wasn't during the game, then I don't think this is a very practical thing to do.
But I think, you mentioned, we talked earlier about the fact, for example, when the rook's pawn advances, it's very difficult to know how to handle that. So it's all about setting your opponent problems and questions. And it's so time consuming dealing with these things. And here I suppose you have another dilemma, to exchange queens or not to exchange queens. And it's a really tough one. Understanding, when to transpose down. So
it's a really tough one. I mean,
with
queens.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. You go on.
No, I was going to say, what is it exactly that you have qualms about exchanging queens here?
Yeah, it's that H-pawn dilemma that you mentioned earlier. Somehow, I know it happened a lot earlier in the middle game, but the black pawn on H6 has been fixed. It's a clear target. Black's king or bishop are going to be tied down, defending that pawn long term. And I kind of gambled that I couldn't see a way through for white. It's this whole theory of two weaknesses. If you've just got one weakness, you can usually defend. And I thought, okay, it's better than sitting in a queen endgame where I might even lose a pawn and have to kind of gamble on some counterplay. But I think that would have been the better practical decision, kind of knowing what I know now. Just keeping queens on, there's always a chance of perpetual check. There's always some hustling ideas, but here concretely it's actually lost.
I agree about queen endgames. I think they are my least favorite endgame. I really dislike queen endgames. Because
the only thing people know about queen endgames is that we know nothing about queen endgames. Nobody does.
Oh, they're so difficult. They really are. Okay, so this is what happened.
Yeah, and actually, if we backtrack just to f4, again, we talk about it in the book in quite some detail, but f4 is not the kind of move that a true grinder would play. You kind of want to keep your options open as long as possible, especially when it comes to fixing pawn structure, unless you're 100% sure that any transitions, any new kind of developments, transformations suit you. Because f4 actually puts a pawn on a dark square. It blocks the white bishop's path to h6, as we see in a moment. And it's actually interesting that nearly any other move wins for white other than f4. For example, king f3 or g4. Or,
I have to say g4 would be the one that would appeal to me instantly. get it off a dark square.
Exactly. And
just
again, it's
fix them.
Youth. Yeah, exactly. Now, I mean, you're an experienced player. G4, I think, would come to mind. But when we were young, we were trying to force the issue. I think a lot of club players, even more experienced club players, try to force the issue a bit too much. Sometimes, as we explain in the book, you just got to sit back and think, okay, no calculation to be done.
Yeah. Okay, so this is how the game went. And now, this must have come as a massive relief.
Oof, yeah. Pawn on f5. Light square blockade. Still one weakness on h6, which was a bit annoying. But the rest of the game, there was no breakthrough. Maybe just if I can point out one final variation here. Okay, we can maybe just show that after I put a black bishop on g7, there's nothing to do for white, really. But one kind of demonstration of how much life there can be in these seemingly innocuous endgames. If he hadn't played f4, if he had played, for example, king f3.
So just going back.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so king f3.
Yeah, just for example, say black plays f5 to try and do something similar to put pawns on light squares.
Yeah.
G4, say.
Yeah. So king
F,
f6. Oh, okay, go on.
yeah,
f4.
or
Sorry.
king f6. King f6, bishop c5 is always a problem
Ah,
going
right.
round and behind.
Just straight in. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's nice.
and yeah, for example, after f4, bishop c5, king f7, just a sample variation, e3. Let's say f takes e3, f e3, bishop g7. Let's say e4, king e6. It looks like everything's just getting traded off, but black is completely lost after king e3. It's just zugzwang, and just one weakness is enough. This pawn on h6.
That's really, really nice position. That's beautiful, actually. Yeah, so the bishop can't move because let's just show that. So if the bishop comes down here, then let's say this one will do that. So the bishop actually doesn't have any moves, and the king can't move. And if pawn takes pawn, then here, and then the king has to move back. This is fun. This
Yeah.
oh, this looks grim. Oh no, do you go the other way? I suppose
Yeah,
you play king d5, yeah?
probably king d5. Yeah,
Yes, and
and
go for
yeah,
that one. Yeah,
sooner or later it collapses for black. And yeah, I mean, again, we talk about these kind of long-term things in the book, but if you play good positional moves, then kind of chances like this always tend to appear,
yeah.
even with no material on the board. So
Fascinating.
yeah, man.
Really, really nice variation. Actually, that's great.
Yeah, thanks.
So, do you want to pick out another game?
Yeah.
What's? Give me a favourite win of yours that you have in the
Ooh,
book.
favorite win. Let me think. Probably the game against Harikrishna. There was a game. I've actually had a few famous games against Harikrishna from my career that we talk about in the book. One of them was a 236 move game where I was trying to grind him down for 8 hours, but unfortunately couldn't quite get there in the end because he's also well known as a fellow
He is.
in-game
He's a
lover.
proper grinder. Is Harry, isn't he?
He is.
Yeah, yeah. He likes it. So, where would you like to start with this one?
Yeah, so maybe just around move 18, we can start just, it's a quite well-known theoretical opening. And yeah, just a bit of backstory. So after that game with Magnus, back in 2002, he didn't talk to me for, I think, 9 years or so. He hated me for stopping him from winning a gold medal.
Ah,
And
nice.
and then it was only later he played a tournament in London, the London Chess Classic, and we kind of reconnected. And this game was quite memorable for me quite a long time later because he'd invited me to play for a Norwegian team. We nearly won the European Club Cup, which he's just gone and done last week
Yeah.
for the first time. And yeah, I was playing board two. I was terrified sitting next to Magnus. He's so judgy. He's such a harsh critic. And I was just playing every game as if, okay, I can never lose. I just even if I don't win, just no risk. So I tried to take the queens off early in this game. And yeah, still a relatively well-known branch of the Catalan opening this one.
Yes, I seem to remember getting beaten by Jonathan Spielman in exactly this variation once upon a time. That was one of John's specialities for some time ago. Anyway.
Oh, sorry to dredge up.
No, not at all. Absolutely fine. John's a good grinder. I'm telling you.
Yeah,
he's a good endgame player.
Among many of his skills.
Yeah.
And
so
yes,
where should we get to?
So around maybe here, after bishop to e8, bishop to e8, it was still a well-known position. My opponent had been playing every move instantly. And I think we talk a bit about opening preparation in the book, but I'd prepared this one again with it in mind that I could pull the break, kind of pull this kind of safety break anytime I wanted, no risk. White has the bishop pair. Kind of as a grinder, you always look for these very small kind of long-term advantages. And it's a relatively open position. So rook d3 was my first kind of innovation. It wasn't quite a new move, but I think it had only been played once before. And
this is earth-shattering, David. Rook d3. Wow.
I'll show you some of my better novelties later, Dan.
This is grinder's chess. This is great.
It's really sad that moves like this get me excited. It's like
yeah.
you keep the tension, you ask your opponent to improve your pawn structure.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so let's fast forward.
Yeah, so the rooks come off, and I actually managed to. Yeah, I've got a lot of fond memories with this rook d3 move. I beat Adams like a year later in this as well. And,
exactly the same position.
With rook d3 as well.
Fantastic.
And yeah, it was around here where after h6, I just sat there for, well, in kind of characteristic style, sat there for 20 minutes being like, okay, what's my plan? How am I going to position my pawns? I realized I need to make advances on the king side. I'm a bit stuck on the queen side right now, but you need to centralize the king. So kind of, again, it's the type of moves that I get excited by, but might not appeal to everyone. King f1, king e1, bring the king closer to the center, and only later starting to expand on the king side.
Nice and steady. Well, okay, let's tell you what. Let's ask chat.
Mm-hmm.
What, chat? Here we go. What would you play in this position for white? What's your next little plan? So, I mean, I think it's a sort of well-known sort of trope in these kind of endgames that one sort of has little mini plans of, say, 2 or 3 moves.
Yeah.
So what's the next little mini plan for white? Ah, there we go. Guy Oliveira is straight in with h3 and g4. Well done, Guy Oliveira.
Nice.
H3 and g4. So tell me, why did you play that, David?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of, it sounds simplistic, but it's just to gain space. It's to open a second front of attack. White has ideas of playing c5 at the right moment. But if you play c5 too soon, you might get blocked with b5, and block positions will help knights. So yeah, it's just opening kind of the second way into the black position. Potentially, as we maybe see towards the end of the game, fixing the pawn structure in a favorable way, just in case for later on. And yeah, again, it's just unpleasant psychologically for the opponent if you're kind of pushing on both sides of the board and they kind of struggle for a concrete plan of their own.
It's interesting, isn't it? You know, you mentioned you didn't want to give these knights squares, and actually at the moment, certainly that knight on f6 is struggling to find a square. That knight could potentially go to e5, but apart from that, it can't really do too much. So yeah, and your bishops are kind of just lurking there. I can see those pawns on the king side. They're now getting a bit more fixed after this one, aren't they? Which is very appealing.
Yeah, it's actually the g7 pawn later that ends up kind of falling and being the big weakness fixed on a dark square, because white has the unopposed dark squared bishop. And yeah, actually, I've kind of made a conscious decision 7-8 years ago to kind of head for these positions. I based all my opening repertoire on getting positions with the bishop pair.
Really?
No matter what it, yeah.
Really conscious decision in your opening prep.
Very conscious, because I kind of, someone pointed out just as a passing comment, as a joke, just, oh, you always seem to win when you have the bishop pair. And I went and looked at my games, and I think it was something like 60% of the games I'd won that year, I had the bishop pair at some point. And,
really? Wow.
Yeah, at that point, it was just a kind of, yeah, totally unconscious kind of thing that was happening. But I kind of decided to make full use of that. So I play openings now.
That's really
branches of the Berlin, branches of
Harikrishna,
Sicilian that kind of give me the bishop pair. Don't tell my future opponents. But...
No. I won't. We've got it. Sorry, just very quickly, a quick question from Wesley Vickers. I'm a club player with Cheddleton around 1650 ECF. Nice. And I often have to play much stronger players, 1800, 1900. Does David have any thoughts on how to and when to play active and when to wait and grind? What are the preconditions for a grind?
First of all, very good question, and shout out to Cheddleton, my former team.
Oh really? Oh yes. No, of course. Yeah.
In the Foncial, I used to play.
Yeah.
For them for years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult. I would recommend playing to your own strengths first and foremost, wherever you're most comfortable. This book is aimed to improve players who maybe don't grind so much, or to kind of give a little edge to players who like to do that. But I'm not saying grind in every game, and not to make it as boring for the sake of being boring. Not to necessarily trade off pieces again for the sake of trading off, because against stronger players, simplicity isn't necessarily it doesn't lead to salvation. So I would say play how you like to play. Just if you study all parts of the game, you might just feel more confident in maybe simplified positions. And if you're less sure about being active, then study your tactics. Maybe look for some other books as an accompaniment. I think to this one.
If you play the Grand Prix attack, then okay, we can forget about the grinding and the exchanging queens. You keep those queens on.
Exactly.
It depends on and if there's some open Sicilian position where clearly you're playing the English attack and you're throwing the H and G pawns down the board, well, yeah, the grind comes later, but yeah, it all depends. So, but I mean, as you said, you've actually honed your repertoire to actually play for these kind of positions, which I think is fascinating, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
sorry.
yeah. Of course, the goal is to be universal, but
yeah,
I definitely recommend that. Play to your strengths and yeah, tune things accordingly.
Listen, let's press on with the game because
yes,
we're on move 26 and there are 85 moves to get through. And listen,
that's the story of the book.
Yeah, and I've got quite a lot of things to do tonight, so I want to crack on.
That's the difference between you and me. I have no life, so I'm just going to sit here and study endgames all night.
I don't believe that, David.
So yeah, just the next few moves are just about gaining space, trying to control some squares. F4. Clearly, my opponent's trying to reroute his knight. I'm just happily plodding along, and F5 was a tough decision because you don't want to block it necessarily when you have bishops, but I'd already had in mind that the G7 square might be a bit tender long term if my dark square bishop ever lands, a bit like that Magnus game, if it ever lands on F8 long term, then black's pawns will start falling like flies.
I think what's interesting is, coming back to this thing that we mentioned earlier, those knights don't really have good squares to go to, which I think is the really important point in the position, actually. Where there's someone mentioned earlier in the chat, going way back around here when we were sort of discussing, you mentioned C5 and then B5, and they said, "Ooh, don't know about that," because it would give the knight potentially a square on D5. And yeah,
exactly.
after this one, there still isn't a good square for the knight, for either knight, actually.
Yeah, and I think that's the theme of the rest of the game. And people talk a lot about bishop pairs, but we talk in the book quite a lot about dominating knights. And yeah, if you can dominate your opponent's knights, firstly, you cut out all those active tricks. It's a grinder's dream, but also I think strategically things tend to be quite pleasant. So yeah, I finally get this bishop to this diagonal that we were talking about. And we enter the time trouble phase, as usual.
Time trouble. Now, tell us about time trouble. What you're kind of renowned for, let's say, going right down to the wire with your time.
Brinksmanship.
Yeah. So how did this develop?
I mean, I remember playing you, Danny, and I was always in time trouble at the age of 12, 13 already. I think it's just a bad habit, and I've worked actively to try and kick it, but it never seems to. I can't stumble across a long-term kind of solution, unfortunately. So I've learned to adapt, as you have to in chess and life.
Okay. Do you think this is perfectionism? You're trying to get it exactly right. What do you think's the root of it?
Yeah, I think it's mainly perfectionism. There's a few times, for example, at the end of the opening, I tend to have a long tank. Like I go into, I start thinking for 20 minutes for no reason when I'm out of book because I'm scared of my opponent's preparation. So there's some psychological stuff and maybe feeling underprepared, especially nowadays when I play a little bit less. But yeah, I think it's 80% perfectionism, and that's not necessarily a good thing, but that's why I've kind of headed towards positions where calculation is slightly less key. These types of positions where you can kind of play on instinct, play on general principles, and again, it's tailoring it to my weaknesses, but also hopefully playing to the strengths.
Yeah, that's interesting. We've got Manmoth 1990 says, so let's organise a Howell Grishuk match.
Actually, I played Grishuk in 2019, and I think that was the last time I saw you in person.
I was going to say, I remember that game, and actually it went like moves 30 to 40. You were both, you both had like a minute left. It went absolutely down to the wire.
I'm flattered you say move 30 to 40. It was like move 20 to 40. It was like...
I know, it was mad, wasn't it? I remember watching the guy. I was commentating on the game. It was incredible. And basically you outplayed him. Very, very nice game. And yet... it was always on the edge just because both of you... I mean, Grishuk is also... He's maybe more renowned for time pressure than you, actually. But that was a very entertaining game. And, very well played, as you got him in the end in a really nice game. Yeah.
Yeah, luckily I managed to get actually a very similar position to this, also similar opening. And it was more about feel rather than calculation, where he would have had me on toast every time. But yeah, this game... we kind of go around for a while. I finally get c5 in, finally opening up some lines, but yeah, he found a nice way to kind of keep the balance. This knight b7 I'd originally missed, and pieces come off the board. There's some tactics actually. There's a couple of cool variations. If you want to check them out,
Do you want to go back
at the book? No. I think
in the book.
we'll leave them.
Okay, okay, fine. Yeah.
There were some cool lines with c takes b6, giving up a rook on c1 and b takes a7. Yeah, we won't delve into the tactics. That's not what we're here for.
No. God, no. That would be far too interesting.
So the beautiful bishop pair's gone, but the more pieces that disappear, the more g7 is kind of accentuated as a weakness, and now the white knight goes round for the g7 pawn.
It's scary with these knights hopping around, but
yeah,
you've contained them.
I've contained them, and actually he did have a way to draw just a few moves ago, or like to maintain the equality at least, but he'd simply missed in this position that taking on e4 doesn't save him because the bishop gets to f8. And
let's just show that one.
Yeah,
because that's
and again, no matter how simple the position, there's always chances in endgames. And unfortunately, black can't give up his knight for the 3 kingside pawns and rush the black king to a8 with the famous wrong coloured rook's pawn. Because white just picks up too many pawns too fast.
I mean, we're kind of rushing through these variations, but in fact, calculation is just such a key part of these endgames. I mean, you've described well. I like these sort of plans, but actually, there are crunch moments like this when it turns into some kind of race, or there's this knight hopping around, and you've got to be so precise. This is an important element of the play as well.
Yeah, I would say that this kind of style it requires a lot of 2 to 3 move calculation rather than the longer, deeper lines that often top players like to show off about. So definitely one to practice, and I think that's something that I've always done pretty well at. And yeah, I think the key move to win this one was a few moves back. It was just h4, just keeping the h pawn alive because that's a future queen. And now black's pawns start to fall, and it's just a bit of a maths equation now. The rest is pretty straightforward. But this was the first time in my life that I got a hug off Magnus after the game. He stayed for like 5 hours after he finished because we were teammates, and this was the decisive game in the match against the top seeds in the tournament. And I was like, "Get off me, man! Like I'm just
a sweet and tender moment."
But yeah,
excellent. Very nice. So that's a nice memory. Okay, you mentioned this calculation, and this is something that gets talked about a lot, about calculating accurately and visualization. And you said, well, this is something for people to work on. Have you consciously practiced your calculation skills?
Yes, I have.
And if so, how?
I'm going to be really unprofessional here, Danny, and just have to plug in my computer. I've just got a low battery warning. I'm really sorry.
Yeah. No. Carry on. and I'll read through some of the chat.
Okay. My bad.
You do that. Yeah. All right. So Kevin says, once saw David playing over an hour on 30-second increment. Wow. He was completely losing in the British Championship, but his opponent cracked despite having massive time advantage. Wow. Bula asks, when do you know to move the pawns, fixing structure, weakness, etc., and when to improve your pieces? Seems like grinding includes both, but you can only do one at a time. Of course, it absolutely depends on the position. And here, as David mentioned, for example, h3 and g4 looked very typical to start fixing that pawn on g7. Samir Khan, who's obviously late to the show. Is this a new book by David? It is indeed. So I'm going to just mention the book again. Here it is. So it's called Grind Like a Grandmaster. Hopefully you can see that. Grind Like a Grandmaster by David Howell and Magnus Carlsen. It's just been published. I think it's just a few weeks old, this book. Published by New in Chess. And you can get it directly from New in Chess in collaboration with Chessable. You can also get the videos from chessable.com as well. So it's a Chessable course, but it's now published as a book with some extras in the book as well. to sort of put it into book format. And I've got to say, it's a beautifully produced book. It's not just that flashy cover, but it's beautifully set out, and games are explained really, really well. There are not really long variations, but its strategy is described. So it's a really nice book, I have to say. So yeah, for all you latecomers, €29.95 or dollars. Get it directly from New in Chess or your favourite stockist. There we go. We'll mention it again, David. How's the laptop looking now?
It's alive. It's alive.
It's alive. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic.
I saw some jokes in the chat, like the laptop battery is under time pressure, and it genuinely was. So
yeah, exactly.
I'm glad I survived that scramble.
Manmoth 1990 asked, "Does Magnus feature in the Chessable videos?"
The answer is yes. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
It was actually his idea to kind of get this course, kind of turn it into reality. I was a bit reluctant. I wanted to do one of those openings, lifetime repertoire opening courses as my debut with Chessable. But Magnus was like, come on, we called it GLG. Do you know this song TNT, by the way? Like TNT, it's dynamite. I don't know why I'm singing with a musician.
Do you know what? That one has actually passed me by.
I'm trying to.
Who recorded that?
One sec. I'm just.
Okay, I've got to.
Okay, it is AC/DC.
Oh, wait a second. Well, that's more my genre.
TNT. I was going to say AC/DC, and I was like, wait, if I get this wrong, chat will crucify me.
No, it is. It is. I've got Spotify here. It is TNT.
Yeah,
it's AC/DC.
Yeah, like after games, sometimes if we were in a restaurant or a bar afterwards, we would, especially if one of us had won a long grindy game, we would sing like GLG instead of TNT, and then we had this little in joke. And
nice.
It was him who wanted it to turn it into a course, but he's not the most organized of individuals, so I had to do all the PGNs and the labeling and the kind of this kind of making it look presentable and kind of putting it into different chapters. And
that's really interesting. So we got a little insight into Magnus's life.
And anyway, we did.
Okay, moving on.
We did the videos. I managed to trick him into finding a couple of spare days when he's not busy playing his tournaments. And then the book a year later.
Good stuff. Okay. We should probably move on to another game very quick. Let's have. I should say. One absolute highlight of the book is the explanation of Game 6. It was Game 6, wasn't it? In the World Championship against Nepo.
Yeah.
Hang on. It's not Game 6. It's Game.
It was Game 6 of his match against Nepo.
Yeah, it was.
I think it's the final game of the book.
Yeah, exactly. It was Game 6. I wasn't. Yeah. So this famous endgame, and I like what you said in the introduction that after he won that game, he sent you a text. And what did he say in the text, David?
This one was for you.
Well, that's great. There you go. You got a little pat on the back, a little bit of recognition there from the maestro.
And it was nice because his final game his winning kind of, I call it the decisive game because after this his opponent cracked a bit in the World Championship match. But I had been kind of preaching. I had been telling him like, okay, just play something super slow, play something with G3, non-theoretical, and just get a long game. Just like his stamina is not as strong. He won't like the grind, and of course it was on the edge all the time. Of course, at that level, you can never guarantee anything. But 136 moves later, Magnus did manage to.
That's really interesting because it wasn't. In a way, it felt like the end result of the game. End result of the match, where Nepo basically cracked after this extraordinary Game 6. If everyone can remember, that was the beautiful final position. And I think he looked exhausted, didn't he, after this game? It really was a cumulative effect, actually. I thought there was one very, very interesting comment that Magnus made around about... I've got to pick the right move. Probably around when it's the pure position, here. I thought this was really interesting. And he mentioned something about the king. about the
Mhm.
king finding shelter.
Yeah.
Do you recall this?
Yeah,
I'll
I
dig
do
out the
recall. I
annotation
don't.
because I thought this was actually really, really instructive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the exact wording, but you're right. He was already thinking. You mentioned earlier, like this phrase "micro plans." It's just kind of 2-3 move
Mm.
plans where he wants to put the king, where his knight is perfect, where his rook will, where everything protects each other basically. And
Yeah, here
um,
we go. It's in fact
mhm,
it is exactly this position. So Queen A5 was played,
mhm.
and Magnus says in here, I'll just quote: "I think Queen A5 is a crucial mistake. He allows my king to escape to the short side, where it will be more difficult to check." And you say it's a very interesting concept, getting the king to the short side in queen endings to stop the check. Still, did you even think about winning chances here? Magnus said, "Not really. I just took it step by step. But after this last move, I became more optimistic." And instead of queen a5, he says, "I think queen b6 check is clearly better than queen a5 because after knight d4, queen a7, the king basically you can keep checking the king and there's no sort of clear route to get to the short side." So I think I found that fascinating actually. So once the king reaches this short side and the knight is perfectly placed on g3 to shield the king, as it covers those squares, and the king can potentially hide well all around the knight. Then, as he said in the notes, he started to get more optimistic.
Yeah, and it's just these 2-3 move plans again. It's like, okay, where does he want his king? He wants it on the short side. Where does he want his knight? Around the king, defending the pawns. Where does he want his rook? And again, taking 2-3 moves to bring the rook up to d5 to f5, making sure everything's protected. And yeah, I mean, often a lot of us, myself included, we just read moves off the engine and we're like, okay, probably that one. But we don't really think about the reasoning, kind of the logic behind it. And yeah, that's the idea behind this conversation kind of in the book, just to, yeah, to unravel some of the mysteries of why these top players play these seemingly mysterious
Yeah.
moves. And yeah,
No.
you said the final position is beautiful. It's nice that White's king is going to hide on g8 behind enemy lines and the pawns run through.
Yeah. I mean that. Just to kind of come back to this idea, the fact that White only needs to hide from checks kind of from this direction. You don't need to hide because there's no more board space basically. I think that's really interesting. And yes, after knight g7, okay, let's make some random checks. Let's. I mean, obviously Nepo resigned, but let's just keep things going, and eventually that king hides there, and then the pawn just runs through. So yeah, again the king is hiding at the edge of the board, beautifully protected by all the pieces. So I mean
Yeah.
that was just an absolutely brilliant game, and yeah, all about Magnus's stamina. I mean, when you're playing these really long games,
Mhm.
being physically really fit must really count in your favour.
Yeah, and kind of just again, it's just being in the mindset of sitting there and kind of trying not to let day-to-day life get in the way. And yeah, I mean, it's something that I actively work on at least now, maybe more than when I was younger. When I was younger, it kind of
Well,
I don't know,
one
it's
is
more of a
naturally fit.
subconscious.
You don't think about it,
Exactly,
yeah. And now,
exactly. So I have to work on it now,
yeah,
but also just yeah, sitting there training the mind to not get too distracted, to always just keep asking yourself those questions we've been saying, like how to pose a problem, how to ask a question, how to slowly improve, and just getting in that rhythm, I think helps so much. It's really underestimated. And yeah, maybe if I could just show one last moment from the book, maybe my personal highlight,
no,
if that's
please,
cool, Dan.
please, yeah.
Yeah,
Which game?
because it's the game between Magnus and Vachier-Lagrave.
Yep.
Because
Okay,
just before my battery nearly died, you asked about calculation and whether I work on that.
okay,
And a lot of the top players, I've been lucky to go to training camps with some world-class players, and I mean, with some of these Indian youngsters, for example, and they're constantly practicing their calculation. And if we go to maybe move, firstly, just 34,
34.
or around 34,
Okay,
with yeah. So firstly, before we get to the calculation part, one thing that I learned the most about, just from talking to Magnus and kind of creating the course and the book, was firstly these 4 versus 3 endgames. I know that kind kind of, you can generalize, you can say what pawn structures you want, but Magnus, he immediately knew which endgames, whether it's knight versus bishop, knight versus certain color of bishop, bishop versus bishop, he knew exactly which ones are drawn, which ones are lost, which ones are unpleasant practically, and he reveals that all in the book as well.
Yeah.
So I found that fascinating. If you know what to kind of aim for, that's half the battle.
Yes.
But also the calculation, if we go ahead to maybe move 46, 47.
Okay. So this is interesting because this is not a game where Magnus is doing the grinding and the squeezing.
Yeah.
This is one where he's having to defend, and actually we haven't discussed that yet. It's not just about squeezing out wins; it's also having the Sitzfleisch, the staying power,
good word,
to hold the draw as well, which is not easy. Absolutely not easy. It's very depressing to have to hold a worse position. But again, that needs a really, really strong mentality.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, this game was kind of included. It's in a chapter that talks about how to grind out these, how to save these really difficult positions. And this was a case of what not to do. Magnus, he kind of miscalculated something earlier, pushing his pawn to f4. It was a dead drawn endgame, and he would have drawn that in his sleep, but he'd actually miscalculated. And I just wanted to pose a question for the viewers.
Yeah, please.
Because after bishop to g8, I think Magnus had calculated that he could kind of force a draw by getting as many pawns off the board as possible. But after g5, bishop to e6, black actually has a forced win. And again, this is where practicing endgame studies, puzzles, all that stuff comes in, because it's 2-3 move calculation. Maybe I'll put you on the spot as well, Dan.
Oh, heck, I was going to say, this is deeply unfair.
It's forcing moves. It's at least the first few are forcing moves. The last move is beautiful, though.
Okay, that's interesting.
So this is, yeah, obviously we can't win endgames without calculation, and this is one of those cases.
Well, I mean, it feels as though if that f5 pawn drops, then that's a slight problem.
Yeah.
But I'd also be looking at moves like g4 and maybe pushing the king back and seeing if there's some kind of way to rush that pawn down the board. But after bishop f5, you have to watch out for a rook h7 mate as well.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel nice. So I don't know. I mean, instinctively, I would start with king g6. I don't know if that's a good move or a bad move.
Yeah, king g6 is a good move. It keeps the advantage, or at least some of it, but there's actually even stronger.
Okay.
Vachier-Lagrave, I mean, one of the best players in the world, played king g6. So you're right. I think on general principles, that would be right. But
okay, what about a rook check first? Is that possible?
Yeah, rook check.
And
maybe
king
just king
f3,
f3.
and that's okay, is it?
Yeah, we'd probably have to repeat. But it starts with g takes h4, which looks counterintuitive.
Absolutely. Okay.
But it's very forcing and very direct.
Okay, so bishop f5. Okay, so presumably one has to... I see. Right. Is it something to do... say h3 takes rook check.
King h2, good.
King h2.
And that move, that position, there's only one winning move for black.
In this position?
Yeah. So again, it's quite linear calculation until here, but this is the hard move to spot, and both players missed this during the game.
I was going to say, it's not immediately obvious to me what the move is. It's not king g5, is it?
Oh, but rook g7.
Rook g. You can just exchange and play king g2. Sorry, not that one.
But you're right. It's a Zugzwang quiet move. So you're on the right lines, definitely.
No, I'm nowhere near it. I can't think of a quiet move or one that's any good. I see. So basically, the rook is gonna. At the moment, we can't play a check because the rook is defended. But if we just move the bishop, for example, I mean, I don't know whether this is good enough. Then is it so that basically white has to lose coordination, so the bishop moves and then we can win that with check, and if the rook moves somewhere,
but here the white rook can hit the black bishop, rook e7 or rook d5 maybe.
Right, okay, so we need a better move than that. So is that the idea, that basically
you've got the idea,
okay,
just need to finesse.
I'm not finding it, of course.
So when the white rook attacks the black bishop, you need to be able to give a discover check and attack the white rook while protecting your bishop. this is just beautiful geometry.
Okay, can we do that?
Yeah,
Bishop b8, is that?
nice. Yeah, and white's in Zugzwang. White loses a piece.
Oh,
Rook
that
b7, rook
okay.
b3, rook d8, rook g8, as always.
That is absolutely
Check.
stunning. Wow. So that position is Zugzwang.
Yes.
Thank you for helping me through.
No, no. Sorry. I mean, if we had more time, I would have been less.
No, that that was nicely coaxed out of me. So yeah, that's Zugzwang. That's an amazing position. I don't think I've ever seen. Well, okay, you see this kind of thing in studies, but okay. So just to explain, if the king moves, we take the bishop. If the bishop moves, then there's a discovered check, and we take this one. And yeah, basically the rook can't move to a safe square. So anywhere the rook moves, let's say here, then discovered check wins the rook. What an incredible position.
Yeah. And your question about tactics just reminded me of this one because, yeah, there's always hidden ideas. There's always a bit of calculation to be done. Yeah, yeah, we have to practice that. Unfortunately, it can't always just be a grind.
Yeah, no. See, I mean, that's really interesting because, as you said, taking the pawn is counterintuitive. It feels as though, yeah, it just feels wrong to do that. However, this is beautiful tactical solution. And so Maxime played king g6 and tried this. Is this basically drawn now?
Actually, it gets a bit flashy near the end. There's more tactics. This is one of those cases, one of the rare cases maybe in the book where it does really rest a lot on calculation. Here, Black has another win. Again, it's kind of study-like.
Okay.
Instead of bishop f4, rook f1 just is the only winning move.
Rook f1. Okay, not an obvious one.
Yeah. Again, it's kind of Zugzwang, and it creates a threat of g2, which is almost unstoppable.
King here.
Yeah. Then rook h1 check.
Rook h1. Okay. King g4 g2. So here.
And a check.
And check here. So let's say, okay, king here.
Yeah, and I think bishop f4 is maybe the way to go. And
okay. So the rook is overloaded. It has to cover both g2 and h5. Is that right?
It still continues a little bit, I think, after rook g4, but essentially black is winning. But there's maybe one last flashy tactic that I could show people in this one. Just need to find maybe a move. Okay, move 61. 61 in the game.
Yep. 61. Yep. King f5.
After king f5, black tried the really clever bishop g5 check.
Oh, interesting.
So my question to the viewers is, what happens after king takes g5?
Okay, let's help him. What happens on king g5? Now this wasn't played.
This was not played, no.
So why wasn't this played? This is the question.
So obviously, well, I think the first move for black is obvious, but white has some resources there that look like they might hold.
We'll try this one. Okay, chat.
Yeah.
How does black actually win this one?
How sharp are you today, chat?
Yeah.
Rook h6 check, I think, is the only resource.
Rook h6, okay.
Mm-hmm. And just keep checking.
So we better clear out.
But now white can move off the g file.
Okay, so that one.
Mm-hmm. And rook versus bishop here, I think still some practical chances, but this is drawn objectively.
We keep going.
So yeah, black has one winning move. And after rook g6 check, yeah, this one's a bit tricky. And again, this time the players spotted this, but it shows all the hidden resources. It looks like white is going to draw by moving the king out of the way, but black walks into the firing line, king f7, and suddenly white cannot stop the g-pawn. We can give a discovered check, but it gets nowhere, and king h6 this time walks into rook f6.
Oh, that's the little swizzy move.
Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, golly, it's so difficult. Oh man.
Chess is hard.
Chess is hard. That's the conclusion. However,
that's what.
Go on. Sorry.
Go on.
No. You keep going, David.
I was going to say that's what sets Magnus apart from the rest of us, but we can try. We can try and emulate.
We can try. Yeah. Let me. Because we're going to have to go fairly soon. Let's just show the book again. It's a really, really beautifully produced book. Grind Like a Grandmaster, David Howell and Magnus Carlsen. New in Chess, publisher in collaboration with Chessable. You can also get the videos at Chessable featuring David and Magnus having nice discussions about these games. I think it's a really instructive book. I think it's beautifully produced, and I think there are some really great tips in there. And nice stories actually. That's the nice thing about it. It's not. I always think it's nice to sort of hang games, particularly if they're instructive, on a peg, so that you can remember them. So yeah, there's some really really nice anecdotes in there as well. Fantastic book. I warmly recommend it. Absolutely brilliant. Guy Oliveira asks, is there a Kindle version?
Ooh, I heard there was. I'm not 100% sure, but I did get a message recently on Instagram. Someone asked about the Kindle version, and I said, sorry, I don't think so. And then 2 days later, he was like, oh, I found it. So it's out there, and I wish I had a link. I'm sorry, but if you message me, I'll try and.
There's. I mean, normally New in Chess produce some kind of ebook, and I think you can basically just download the app and play through the books on your app. I mean, on my phone, I've got the New in Chess app, and it's really great. You can, you're on the train and you can play through books and stuff, which is absolutely brilliant. We've got some questions here. I've got a question. When was this game played? This was played in Stavanger in 2022, that last game. Kevin asks, is David playing the Grand Swiss on the Isle of Man? Are you playing in the Isle of Man?
Long story. I decided not to this year. I had two very close calls with the candidates. So I should have maybe played, third time lucky, but I don't know. People are too strong these days. I'm semi-retired. And
semi-retired? What are you talking
One
about?
of the kids is going to get the spot. I thought it would be more fun to commentate instead. So
okay, fantastic.
I'm succeeding you.
Yeah. No, to be honest, I'm kind of busy, and I stepped back this year. So although I think it's a really great tournament. So you're actually doing the commentary, are you?
Yeah, so I'll be on site in Isle of Man. I love
Fantastic.
the place.
Yeah.
It's lovely, and the organisers are great. So hopefully it'll be a lot of fun.
No, it's
big names there.
No, it's good. That's fantastic. Let me see. Any other questions before we sign off? We're going to sign off pretty soon. I'd like to thank David again for really fascinating hour, and I'm just going to show you that book again. It's good stuff.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
No, not at all. No, we'll have to come on again. I don't do that many live broadcasts actually.
Oh, really?
But no, not many at all. But I think I'm going to start sort of doing a few book reviews. That's kind of it's a nice thing to do. It gives a nice reason to invite someone in, and so yeah, that's good. So are you thinking of doing any more Chessable courses?
It's crossed my mind. I had an idea of doing a Blitz rapid repertoire / tips thing, because I've spent half my life online playing Blitz and Rapid.
Right.
Well, mostly Blitz and Bullet, but
yeah.
I don't know. I'm open to ideas always. I wanted to do a couple of opening things, but most of them have been done at this point, so it's hard to add anything new to the standing literature out there. But
they're also, in my experience, they're really hard work as well.
that too.
Really time consuming. So I'm very proud of the courses I've done, but I tell you what, the audience is really demanding, because if you miss out some key variation, I say, why didn't you cover this? Why not that? And they say, well, hang on, why do you recommend that variation? Because I can see that my computer gives a 0.32 advantage for white. So it's wow. This is kind of the eternal dilemma when you're preparing with white. You think, oh God, that really isn't a big enough advantage to play for a win. And when you're preparing with black, you kind of think, oh God, I haven't really quite equalised. It's hard work.
The story of my playing career, Danny.
Yeah, it's really tough. So yeah, quick last shout out for the book published new in chess.
I've got to mention as well one final thing. I have a kind of childhood friend who just had a kid recent. Well, I say a kid recently. They've got like a 7-8-year-old kid, and they got your book, How to Win at Chess, for their kid, and they loved it. So.
Hang on. I'm gonna just a moment. Just hang on.
Danny's turn to go plug something in.
You see, this is good. We can promote each other's books. You see,
two can play at that game.
Yeah, exactly. So there we go. How to Win at Chess, which is published by Pan Macmillan, who are just some enormous publisher. And yeah, it's fun. Lots of illustrations and some nice kind of colour stories. There we go. We've got King Magnus in there as well. Section on Magnus, and we got sections on women's chess and the Queen's Gambit, that kind of thing. So it's full colour. There we go. So if you want something for a kid who's learning, nice Christmas present, go for that. David, thank you very much for mentioning that.
I've heard good things. I've got to be honest. I heard very good things from the kid.
Oh, well, that's good. That's nice. Excellent stuff. All right. Thanks for mentioning that. Right, folks. Listen, thanks everyone for joining in on the chat. And of course, if you arrived late and you want to catch up with the kind of things we've been discussing and see the whole program again, it will, of course, be on the Power Play Chess YouTube channel. So thanks everyone for attending. And David, thanks very much. See you later. Bye.
It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.